Welcome. Check, check, check. Well, my name's Dylan LeClair. Thanks for tuning in. I'm the moderator of a great panel today. We have three brilliant minds with us to drop a lot of alpha on the Bitcoin Treasury strategy. So before we begin, I'd just like to turn it over to these three and give a brief intro of who you are and a bit of your background. You want to start, Simon?
Sure. I'm Simon Gerovich of Metaplanet. We are a listed company on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. I have a background in TradFi. Started my career at Goldman Sachs in Tokyo as a equity derivatives trader. I then decided to become an entrepreneur. I moved to Thailand and started a hotel company. It was a pan-Asian hotel business across Southeast Asia and Japan. Crypto and Bitcoin was something that I have been passionate about on the side since as early back as 2012. I bought those Bitcoins on Mt. Gox, which is a story for another day. And have been following the MicroStrategy playbook very closely for many years. And so the stars aligned for us back in April, and we officially announced that we would be adopting the Bitcoin standard, and the rest is history.
Thanks. I'm Eric Semler. I've been an investor in technology and media for about 20 years. I had a fund called TCS Capital that focused on technology stocks, public companies. I'm also the chairman of Simular Scientific, which is a publicly traded medical device and software business that's been around also for about 20 years. And it has a great business, a solid cash flowing business that has we've been privileged to have a very strong balance sheet, and we've built up cash over the years with a good business with high margins. And so we recently, too, around the same time as Simon, decided that we would like to adopt a Bitcoin Treasury reserve strategy similar to MicroStrategy to use our cash to buy Bitcoin. And we've been doing that. We've bought $57 million. We've announced that we've bought $57 million of Bitcoin in the last few months. And we filed an S3 with the SEC in early June. They've had comments solely about our Bitcoin strategy, and they made us respond to their comments, and they've kind of dragged the process out for us. But we're hoping that we'll soon be effective and we'll exercise our ATM and allow us to buy more Bitcoin, which is one of the general purposes. We said in our filing that we would use the proceeds for general corporate purposes, including purchasing Bitcoin. So that's what we're looking to do. We're truly inspired by MicroStrategy and the concept of what the value that they've created, and we'd like to do this, something similar to that.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Kang. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of MicroStrategy. We are a business intelligence software company, similar to Simular Scientific, strong profitability, good revenue, durable cash flows, been in business for over 30 years. We've been a public company for over 25. And as many of you know, we began our Bitcoin journey buying and holding Bitcoin on our balance sheet in late 2020. I joined the company 2 years ago in 2022, which was a tough time to join, but it also has come with a lot of great experiences and learnings. Prior to that, I spent my career in, I guess what we all call traditional finance. And I think one of the greatest experiences being part of MicroStrategy and being part of the Bitcoin journey is really seeing and understanding how the old way can be revolutionized into the new way, whether that's operating your business or raising capital or creating shareholder value built on top of Bitcoin. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Love it. Well, I guess a little bit more color on each of the your company's journeys and how it got to the Bitcoin moment would be helpful. So if you want, we can just go down the line again, Simon. If you want to share, you said the Mt. Gox in 2012 personally, but what led to Metaplanet initiating the Bitcoin strategy? What the preconditions and how did that all play out?
Sure. Sometimes I think back at my time at Goldman as being perhaps the most exhilarating time of my life. I probably left too early. I started in 2000, left in 2005. And when I moved to Thailand, I met up with my then business partners to start a hotel business. And hotel business may be exciting, but it's incredibly complicated, lots of moving parts. And so really wanted to embrace at some point in the future a business plan which was a lot simpler. Now, Bitcoin has been something that I was passionate about on the side, and always looking for a way to kind of merge that with the day-to-day business. I recall back to a board meeting in 2015 when I sat in front of the board and said, I think we should accept Bitcoin at our hotels. And that can be a great way for us to begin to accumulate Bitcoin and have that in our treasury. In that moment, I was laughed out of the room and tried to bring it up a few more times, but I think it was too early and the board wasn't ready. Fast forward 5 years, we had a bit of a blessing in disguise, otherwise known as COVID. And COVID was something that affected the hotel industry globally. It was a very difficult time, and there was no exception. We were no exception. And then that was the time when we were approached by another Japanese public company that wanted to buy our network of hotels. And so at that time, we gladly sold. That was another Japanese public company that bought our hotels, and they didn't want to have yet another Japanese public company. And we had a public company in Japan, which has now become Metaplanet. And so I spent the better part of the next year cleaning up the balance sheet, getting rid of staff, paying down debt, and effectively putting us in a position where I think Michael Saylor would call us a zombie company looking for a business. And it was an extraordinary timing and opportunity to do so. Many of you will know that Japan has gone through a sustained period of economic stress. The Japanese yen is at a 34-year low. It's one of the most indebted nations in the world. So national debt is almost 3 times GDP. And I think what's most relevant is that if you're the average Japanese person who loves to travel, who loves to shop, your purchasing power has reduced by almost 2/3 from its peak 30 years ago. And so we have a public company. We realize that Bitcoin is the apex monetary asset, something great for our treasury to have. And so that was the aha moment for us. And we then made it our stated goal to own and to purchase as much Bitcoin as we can over time. I think the last thing to say is credit is due to MicroStrategy for really paving the way over the past 4 years. It's been very inspiring. And if it wasn't for the work that's been done, I think it'd be more difficult for corporations around the world to follow. So I hope that Simular Scientific, Metaplanet, and many more will come.
Love it. Eric, do you want to share a bit about your story?
Sure. We've had like I said earlier, a solid medical business, and as it was accumulating cash, we were spending a lot of our time as a board and as a management team looking at acquisitions. We still are looking at acquisitions all the time. Considered buying back stock. Half of our market value almost half had become net cash. So we were just exploring all the different alternatives, and we were hearing Michael Saylor's drumbeat about the zombie companies, and we realized we were probably one of those companies because we were not getting any love in the stock market. Our stock was not performing well, and we were still very cash rich. So we looked at a lot of different alternatives, and we just decided as a board that this was the best use of our cash. We were fortunate that we were a board that owned more than 30% of the stock of the company. So we have a lot of skin in the game, and we're all very focused on maximizing value for all shareholders, which I don't think is typical for most boards. And that's probably why there are not more of us on this stage. It's sad, really, or it's surprising, I guess, that you can only point to 3 companies that have adopted Bitcoin as their treasury reserve strategy. It makes so much sense to me. And I think part of that obstacle is this issue of kind of getting the board support for it. So many board members at public companies are not interested in kind of thinking outside the box. They really are focused on collecting their quarterly check and don't have a ton of skin in the game in terms of owning shares. So that's part of, I think, why there just aren't more companies like ours. But I think all three of us, four of us, expect that to change soon.
Love it. Andrew, you said backstage and publicly that you joined at the beginning of 2022, which was the start of a real fun bear market in Bitcoin. Maybe you could share a bit about what that experience was like coming from the TradFi world, the expectations going in, and then surviving the depths of a brutal bear market, and then the birth of a new bull. Just some insights there would be great.
Yeah, no, it certainly, as I mentioned a moment ago, was a pivotal time in the Bitcoin markets. I would say, going into 2022, there was a sort of a bull theme, and then towards the second half of the year, everything started to unravel with all the things that were occurring. For me, like I mentioned, it was an opportunity to learn about risk management and how to prudently manage one's balance sheet and capital. And it was one of those areas where conviction, right, was key and central to our long-term success. I can tell you at the end of 2022 and at the beginning of 2023, we had a lot of conversations from people outside the company asking us what we were going to do with our capital structure, if we suggest that we should do this. Again, looking in a traditional finance sense of how companies have thought about corporate finance for the past 50 years. And a lot of people came to us and said, we think you should do this, we think you should do that. And that went against the conviction that we had in Bitcoin, even when Bitcoin prices were at most recent lows of 16,000. For us, it was a defining moment of not only having gone all in prior to that, but staying in and doubling down, right? I know we'll probably talk a little bit about how you can adopt Bitcoin as a corporation, but MicroStrategy's example really has been one of true belief, true conviction, and going all in.
Love it. So when we're thinking about adopting a Bitcoin standard, I think obviously the first order of business is if you're a cash flowing company, you just take your cash, you buy Bitcoin. But in that sort of MicroStrategy playbook, that Bitcoin standard playbook, there's an entire range of suite of tools that can be used. So maybe we can go down the line and just talk about some of those tools in the playbook for each of you individual cases and what's transpired so far, and kind of about pioneering this new form of corporate governance and corporate treasury management, right? As this Bitcoin standard thesis has somewhat flipped the corporate playbook on its head. So maybe if you want to start, Simon, just it's been 3 months, but what has transpired so far, and as we look to the future potentially, what could also be.
Sure. So it's still very early days for us. It's still only in the first 3 months. In April, we looked at our capital structure and we saw that there were unexercised warrants that had been issued previously to another shareholder, and so I arranged to have those reallocated to a group of strategic investors. We brought in 7 different investors at that time, and all of them exercised those warrants, brought cash into the company, and then together with our own cash balance, we acquired our first Bitcoin. Japanese companies are a little bit complicated in terms of what you can do, and we had reached the limit of our authorized share capital. So we had to convene a shareholder meeting, which we did. That happened a month ago, and in that meeting, we had a number of important things approved, but the most important was that we increased our authorized share capital. That now gives us flexibility to go to the market and issue any type of equity security. So obviously we can issue shares, we can issue convertible bonds, we can issue straight debt. And so now as a board, we're really thinking about the most effective way to raise our next round of capital. We're very pleased that the number of shareholders that have suddenly come onto the shareholder list has increased significantly. So back in March, we had something like 7,000 shareholders, and when we last checked, about 2 weeks ago, it's now almost 40,000. And that really just shows that there's a lot of interest among Japanese retail to sort of embrace the strategy. We issued a bond about a month ago at an interest rate of 0.5%. And that just goes to show that in a place like Japan, where interest rates are really low, it is possible to borrow money cheaply. And of course, the only thing to do with yen when you can borrow it is to sell it and buy Bitcoin. So that is the stated objective, to purchase as much Bitcoin as we can over time and use all of the tools that are available to us in the capital markets.
That's great.
Love it. Eric, you want to
Sure.
share your experience?
As I mentioned, we filed for a shelf filing, an S3 filing in June, early June, with the SEC. And in the filing, we mentioned that it was a $150 million shelf with a $50 million at the market offering ATM, and that we would use proceeds for different purposes, including purchasing Bitcoin. So that's really kind of front and center for us. We're waiting for, like I said, for the SEC to let us go effective with that. But I think we share that conviction that we're strong believers in Bitcoin. We're strong believers in it as a store of value. We think it has very similar qualities to gold, but much more optionality and much better features than gold. And since gold trades at a 16 times premium to Bitcoin, we think there's a lot of upside in Bitcoin. And so we are super excited and super convicted, to pursue this strategy. And we're just waiting for the SEC to let us go effective.
Love it. Andrew, one of the things that MicroStrategy has done over and over again is both the at-the-market facilities and the convertible notes, issuance of convertible bonds. I would love to hear you share a bit more color on how the traditional sort of thought in Wall Street and corporate finance of dilution being a really scary thing, and a thing that shareholders hate to see, that with the meta of kind of the corporate buybacks being, debt finance corporate buybacks being the thing that shareholders want the most. And MicroStrategy has flipped that on its head and gone to the market repeatedly and said, we're issuing more shares to buy more Bitcoin. And all the shareholders seem to like that. And, MicroStrategy's share price has been rewarded. So maybe you're just sharing how that's been perceived by investors, institutions, kind of the counterparties that you guys work with, that a corporate works with, and how that's progressed in your time there.
Sure. So dilution, as you said, that concept in traditional finance comes with a lot of, sometimes negative context, because you're issuing capital into the market, and sometimes the outcome of that capital is uncertain, right? Like if you think about a corporate capital allocation strategy, you have some amount of capital that you can deploy. It's a bit of a decision tree, right? You could grow organically your business. You could buy another business. You could perform share repurchases, or you can give dividends, or you can invest. And when it comes to dilution, I think about, and we've talked about this, right? This concept of accretive dilution, right? If you issue shares or debt, for that matter, and you have the capability and the ability to immediately accrete value to your balance sheet, and for MicroStrategy and for others on the stage, what that means is buying Bitcoin, right? If I compare those other corporate capital allocation strategies to buying Bitcoin, and you just look at the MicroStrategy case study, it's very clear that we've been successful in raising capital and buying Bitcoin. If I think back to the August of 2020, the company was trading shares at about $125. Our market cap was about $1.2 billion. And ever since that moment, we decided to take the initial cash balance that we had and invest it into Bitcoin, and then further raise capital to buy more Bitcoin. Today, our shares are trading at $1,600 to $1,700 a share, and our market cap is, a fully diluted market cap we think is about $35 billion. So, close to 30 times the value that we've generated over the past 4 years in taking the capital that we raised and accreting it to our shareholders and growing that shareholder value by buying Bitcoin. So for us, it's been a very successful strategy. We mentioned earlier, companies can also take cash on hand. MicroStrategy in late 2020 had about $550 million of cash on its balance sheet, and it was just sitting there. And by that time, it was earning nothing due to all the events that occurred in 2020. And so really taking that and first putting it into Bitcoin really set the stage and allowed us to look at other means of capital raising. And the dynamic has been very successful. When I think about raising equity through an at-the-market program where you can issue additional equity into the market, MicroStrategy benefits from issuing shares at a premium to our net asset value. So again, just even issuing shares, today and buying Bitcoin, we would accrete value day one. And then, of course, Bitcoin prices, we all believe, will go up, so then you get a flywheel effect there. The great thing about convertible debt is you're issuing debt at very attractive interest rates because the convertible programs tend to be much lower than going and raising secured debt or unsecured debt. Call it anywhere from 0 to 2%, right? Versus if a company wanted to go raise debt today in the market, you're talking about 8 to 12%. So the interest burden is much more attractive. But what happens is you're issuing debt against the share value, which is already trading at a premium to net asset value, and the structure of the convert allows you to then raise capital at a premium to that. So it's like a double benefit. And then again, day one, you buy Bitcoin, you sort of set that gain. And then over the term of that debt, whether it's 6, 7, or 8 years, if we all believe, as we do in this room, that Bitcoin will go up, maybe conservatively by 20 or 25% a year, by the maturity of that instrument, you'll have generated that much more value for your shareholders.
Love it. Michael Saylor has famously said, volatility is vitality. And I think that really speaks to what you just laid out there. Another point kind of here that's really interesting, I think, is that the kind of the case studies that you can look at where companies have added Bitcoin to the balance sheet has seen, never mind just the share price reaction or the market cap, but just the interest and the volume of the shares themselves is quite remarkable. I think if I remember correctly off the top of my head, Eric, Semler Scientific shares a couple days after the announcement traded 20 times the 1 year previous average. So I guess just how do you think about that in terms of being an operator, being CEO, and then also how do you think about the Bitcoin notoriously volatile? How do you think about the future of what Bitcoin's volatility profile looks like, how to manage that, and how do you use that to your advantage as well? You want to chime in, Eric?
Sure. Yeah. For us, it's been a huge bonus and benefit so far. We'd like to be able to capitalize on that. I think that what we've seen is an incredible embrace from the Bitcoin community. So I don't know who all those shares are trading hands with, but I have been kind of blown away by the amount of enthusiasm and people reaching out to say, I bought your stock, I own your stock, and it's a completely different shareholder base than what we had before. And the heavy volume creates opportunities. More anecdotal, when we speak to companies now that we're interested in purchasing, private companies, for instance, they'll say to us, I wouldn't have done this, but now that your stock is so liquid, we can cash out easily if we need to. I think a lot of people worry about, selling in stock, us issuing stock to a company and them kind of being stuck in it. And that liquidity and that volatility creates opportunities that way. I think that, this is a little more technical, but volatility also enables you to eventually get into the options market, right? And there's no options traded on our stock at this point, but we're hopeful that we'll be in that kind of world soon. If the volatility, if the volume and trading activity continues to surge. So in a way, it's good, and obviously you want that to be upside driven, not downside driven. And so far, it's been mostly upside driven, and I think that we would love to sustain that.
Love it. Simon, you and I have talked a bunch about the volatility profile of Bitcoin and the potential or chance for an operating company to not only have a large amount of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but have debt and leverage similar to what MicroStrategy has done. And just maybe if you want to talk a little bit about what the doors that opens up for a corporate a corporate entity from the financing angle, and just again to reinforce the idea that volatility isn't something that's scary and should be avoided at all costs, and it actually is very advantageous. Just some thoughts there.
You're speaking to an equity derivatives trader, so volatility is my middle name. It's something that definitely embrace, and obviously if you understand option theory, the higher the volatility, the higher that option is worth. And so certainly together with volume, as Eric said, is something that's incredibly important. So volume plus volatility means that you're able now to have so many more tools in your tool shed. And so I think we would very much like in the medium term to consider some kind of convert issuance. Japan is a very deep market. The convertible trading market is very active. And so theoretically, we may be able to see a situation where investors pay us to lend us money because they want that embedded call option. So I think MicroStrategy did 7 or 8 year converts with really high volatility that could have 50, 60, 70% option premium. And so the investor is basically getting that free call option and then willing to subsidize or take less on the interest. And so I'm feeling very excited about the potential for that. Other things which I think we can consider, and maybe an idea for your company, is when you do an equity issuance, if you throw in some warrants at the same time, the investor will value those warrants and see that as a discount. And so not only do you get to sell shares, but you have these options that could be exercised down the road. That is sort of a guarantee for more capital if Bitcoin goes to where it should.
Yeah, I'd say, and one other thing is just, it's interesting because a lot of people say, well, I can just buy the ETFs. Why do I need to buy your stock or my stock? And there's a lot of, there are a lot of fund managers, institutional fund managers, I know this from being one myself, that can't buy ETFs. They can only buy individual stocks. And so they're a lot of them are starving to have more exposure to Bitcoin, and they can't do it through the ETF. So we're kind of their 3 options, and I think that the trading activity, the high volume, enables institutional funds to also participate more. So that has that added benefit.
Right. Yeah. Indeed. I was saying that the bond markets are even larger than the equity markets, and they're always looking for something to invest in.
Yeah.
I think MicroStrategy's previous convert was one of the top performing converts in the world. As interest rates rose, every other bond fell in value except yours.
Yeah, that is definitely the case. And in fact, at the beginning of this year, we had some of our convert investors call us up and say thank you. It was, our converts were some of the best performing, or the best performing asset in their portfolio, given what had occurred between 2022 and the end of 2023. But the idea of volatility certainly is something that benefits the construct of having a Bitcoin strategy. If I think about MicroStrategy, we talked about trading volume as one component. Prior to our Bitcoin strategy, I think MicroStrategy shares on a good day probably traded 100,000 shares a day. On a bad day, we're trading 1 million shares a day today, and on a good day, we're probably the most traded company, a listed company, period. And it's one of those things where I hear this a lot. Everyone has an opinion on Bitcoin, right? And in these financial markets, you either love Bitcoin and you want to be on the boat with us, or you hate Bitcoin and you want to be on the boat against us. Right. And all of those constituents come together and create this market that allows and gives sort of like the flywheel effect to like propel the ability for people to raise capital and improve that and enhance that. And so it's really one of those dynamics where volatility is scary, but volatility is vitality. And really, you're thinking about volatility, for me, translates to trying to find that uncorrelated return, right? And so if you think about MicroStrategy, I think we're trading at about 100 vol. If you look at the S&P 500 or the Nasdaq, that's probably 6 to 10 times the volatility of those indices. And you talked about the ETFs. That's MicroStrategy is probably trading at double the volatility of a Bitcoin ETF. So there's a lot of opportunities, whether you're betting for or against, and that creates that demand, and it creates a highly liquid ability for us to raise capital.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, the MicroStrategy converts, I believe, were a couple 100% above par, which just doesn't really happen in a bond market. So I think that's a really interesting thread to pull on, though, where if we zoom out a bit, we're in this macro situation where debt to GDP and all the G7 nations are potentially at a point of no return, where bonds in nominal terms are going to be repaid, but in real terms, sovereign debt, corporate debt, you're almost guaranteed on long duration paper for a negative real return. That's just the situation. There has to be printing. So Bitcoin as this unique asset, absolute scarcity, perfectly engineered scarcity, presents a really interesting opportunity. But like you said, there's a whole class of investors that can't touch it by mandate, right? Whether you're institutions or you have a bond mandate. So this corporate bond, really the corporate convertible bond for a Bitcoin company or a company that invests its cash flow or excess cash reserves in Bitcoin, is potentially, well, not potentially, it's actually happening, but at a smaller scale, a massive crack in the matrix, if you will. So I guess just curious on your thoughts on just maybe for Simon, the bond market in Japan, the interest rates are 1% on the long duration stuff. So I guess just thoughts there. I know you have a lot of friends in the fixed income world. They're definitely looking at Bitcoin. I guess just what's the lay of the land and what's the potential here for a blended Bitcoin instrument?
The Japanese market is starved for yield, absolutely starved for yield. So as you said, it's not easy for an institutional investor to invest in something that has Bitcoin exposure. But the brilliant thing about a convertible structure or buying into a listed company is it may own Bitcoin, it may be a proxy for Bitcoin, but ultimately it is a listed company, and it's a convertible on a listed company. So it kind of fits into a different bucket. I'm often speaking to my former TradFi friends, and this was 3-4 months ago, saying, would you buy a stock like ours? And they said, well, we like what you're thinking, but your liquidity is too low, your market cap is too low. Come speak to us once the size of the company is bigger. And so thanks to the Bitcoin strategy, we are now investable by most so the funds out there looking at Japanese companies. So that's definitely something that is quite exciting. We're looking forward to really thinking about what the next structure is for us, and there's so many different tools that are available to us. I think I would say that the important thing for us to consider is what is something that is favorable to minority investors. When you're in Bitcoin, you have people that have a little bit of money, a lot of money. They don't want to feel like you are placing shares to a third party that is getting a benefit that everyone else isn't. So that's sort of weighing in the back of my mind. What is something which can avail of, investors broadly can avail of?
Love it. Andrew, I'm curious on, you joined in 2022. Bitcoin endured a pretty brutal bear market. MicroStrategy being levered beta Bitcoin, suffered even worse temporarily. Has since fully recovered and hit new highs. So, and at the same time, MicroStrategy has hosted multiple Bitcoin for Corporations events. So I guess just behind the scenes, whatever you can share, what has the conversation been like, and how has that evolved for prospective corporations, institutions that are looking to invest in your company, the financing third parties that you work with? Just like, how has the conversation evolved since the start of 2022 to today?
I think it's evolved with sort of the Bitcoin backdrop, which has improved significantly this year. I'd say, in that bear market, things were challenging, and we had some tough conversations. But I can tell you that whether it's a third party or a customer of our software business, vendor risk management type focuses, we had a lot of those conversations. But when we came out of those conversations, people, even those that weren't fully committed to Bitcoin, understood why we were doing it and understood how we were doing it in a prudent, risk-managed manner. And so I think the experience of that was just being transparent and simple, especially when times are tough, adds value and adds a benefit to perception when you're outside looking in. I'd say today, 2024 in particular, with a lot of the progress we made around the regulatory clarity, the approval of the ETFs, now we've got large financial institutions like BlackRock not only selling an ETF product, but championing the purpose and the validity and the value of Bitcoin. I think those things will continue to shift. I think if we're sitting here a year from now, I think that will continue to improve. I think there will be more companies adopting Bitcoin. There's 3 of us here today. There's probably going to be 6 or 12 next year, so hopefully I'm still invited if there's room on the stage.
Yeah.
But I think those movements, those improvements, the maturity of the ecosystem are all lending itself for people to be more accepting of it. And when you step back and look at the value that's been created for MicroStrategy and that has been created by Semler and others that will continue to show and demonstrate that, I think people will further get it.
Love it. Well, I think when we're thinking about the corporate adoption and going from the idea phase to actual implementation, one of the hurdles that has probably been the most prominent behind closed doors has been the boardroom acceptance, right? And obviously, companies that have concentrated voting rights can move swiftly, but maybe companies that are widely held by institutions that are a bit more rigid, it's a bit of a different story. So maybe Eric, I would love to hear your experience in just how this went from idea phase to actually being rolled out.
Yeah, I think that when you have a board like ours that has a lot of skin in the game and is looking to maximize value, you're willing to consider all types of things it's going to create value. And the board that we had, our board, fortunately, is very flexible and open-minded. And I don't know if you see that as commonly as it is on our board, but our board members were relatively new to Bitcoin. They hadn't spent a ton of time thinking about it. And as a group, I kind of played an educating role. I brought it to the board, and I discussed the pros. We discussed the pros and cons, and we debated it heavily. And I was, just kind of surprised, to be honest with you, that there was such an alignment, because I expected, it to be a very difficult process to kind of get to the finish line. And credit to them for understanding, that there is this upside in Bitcoin and that it made sense as a Treasury reserve strategy. So I think that a lot of what MicroStrategy has been preaching, a lot of what Michael Saylor has saying about zombie companies was very easy for us to relate to. It was a very powerful concept, I think Simon referred to it, that when you listen to that as a board member, when you listen to that story and you see what the value that MicroStrategy created, you have to listen. You have to kind of, take it pretty seriously as an option. And that's why it's so surprising that more companies aren't doing that. But that was a key factor, I think. The MicroStrategy for corporations story really resonated for us and helped a lot.
Love it. Well, Simon, maybe do you want to give a bit of color on kind of what that looked like from a board operational standpoint? And I guess one last thing, we got a few more minutes here, is maybe this is kind of a given. We're at Bitcoin 2024, but there's 1 million cryptocurrencies, right? But it's a Bitcoin strategy, right? And I think that's something that we kind of take as a given. But what led to the firm Bitcoin decision as well as the board story for you?
Sure. So in the board meeting that we had sort of back in April to do this, there were some naysayers on the board. Naysayers more in the sense that this seems like something terribly risky. That voice is now gone because the public market perception has been very positive. And so my conservative board member constantly says to me, this defies conventional wisdom. But now I'm a believer that adopting a Bitcoin standard, plugging into the apex monetary asset is something that can really transform a company. You asked about other cryptocurrencies. If Michael Saylor was on the stage, he would say there is no second best, and I certainly believe that. I think it took me a long time to read the Bitcoin standard. I recommend anyone who in the audience hasn't read the book to absolutely read it, because you will not want to buy anything else but Bitcoin.
Love it. Well, I think that's all we got today. Appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope this was a valuable conversation, and I appreciate you guys sharing insights and wisdom.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Bitcoin Conference. We started with a dream to build a community focused on Bitcoin. It all started in 2019 in the heart of San Francisco, the first major Bitcoin conference in years that kickstarted a revolution. And then Miami, a place where enthusiasts, developers, dreamers, and innovators could come together to make Bitcoin better. It has been an amazing 5 years and 8 conferences, thanks to all of you. Bitcoin Conference has become the largest premier global Bitcoin gathering in the world, leading hyper-Bitcoinization. While Miami was incredible, it was time to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. So we took the conference on the road. Nashville, Tennessee was the obvious choice, a city known for music and freedom. Next year, the conference is hitting the road again in search of the next global stage. We are headed to a new city next year. With hyper-Bitcoinization right around the corner, we have no plans to take the foot off the gas. Find out where we are headed next. Scan the QR code and be at the main stage for the big announcement.